Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream this week. It's Monika Wahi, and we're at our weekly data science live stream. Of course, I'm going to sneeze right now. My nose is tickling me. Excuse me. It's Boston, it's the pollen. Well, thank you for showing up again. Those of you who are coming back. Actually, let me put on the chat overlay. And thanks to you who are coming for the first time. Those of you who've been to data science chat before know the ongoing soap opera is I'm not seeing people in the chat. What's happening is people who are joining from LinkedIn are chatting and and I'm not seeing it in the chat. It's supposed to display. You can see where it says there's a space where it's supposed to be in the chat overlay. And the only questions I'm seeing are coming in from the YouTube version of this because I'm streaming to both. So if you're on LinkedIn and you like being on LinkedIn, it's no problem. You can say things, but I won't see your comments until after the stream. I'll go back and look at them. I'll try to, like answer them then. But if you want to actually chat, you're going to have to go in through the YouTube and then I'll be able to see it. We'll all be able to see you. All right. And I'll try to sort of say that maybe halfway through the stream, remind everybody. The the software I'm using to stream is called Restream, and there's a lot of good things about Restream. I really like using it. But this is kind of buggy right now, this whole chat thing, because it's integration. And other people who use this application are like, working with them to try to evolve it to get it better. So I apologize for that. So those of you joining, so if you want to actually chat or try to chat, go ahead and say hi and tell me where you're from. And you'll know that today's topic is like I'll read the actual topic: 3 tips for publishing in peer-reviewed journals. So I expect those of you who are watching this or coming here today are concerned about that. Like you want to publish in peer-reviewed journals, and you're maybe at various levels of sophistication. Like I work with a lot of people who actually have published in peer-reviewed journals multiple times, and they still feel like they kind of don't know what they're doing because it's really hard. It's a really complicated ecosystem, the scientific publishing. So that's one of the things that I do. I'm an expert at is that whole ecosystem, but I can't explain that in an hour. So I just picked out 3 tips that are sort of generic things that I find that when I'm working with customers, even sophisticated ones, I'll give them these tips and they're like, Monica, I had no idea. So these are sort of like insider tips, that you get to know after you've been publishing a lot in the scientific literature and had a lot of different experiences. That's the thing is whenever I'm working with a customer and we're submitting a paper to a scientific journal, I'm famous for saying that every single time you do that is a completely unique experience. There's always some new thing that I like never saw before. It's never every single thing we do is something I've done before. There's always some weird nuance. And um there probably shouldn't be. Like there's a bigger discussion about whether this is good or not, whether the situation is a good situation. I'm leaving that aside in this presentation and just saying, how do you get through the situation? Um, all right. So after I'm going to show you some slides, and feel free to go and ask a question. I'll just have to look back and forth from the slides. And those of you who are watching this or want to get the slides, what I do is on YouTube after this is done, I go back and I update the description on YouTube with timestamps, and then I'll put a link to the slides so you can download them and links to other things that I bring up. All right, so let's go and start our presentation now because I don't see any questions. Let's see here. So here we go. Um, so this is, like I said, my topic for today, which is 3 tips for publishing in peer-reviewed journals. Let me just make sure that's showing up. Okay, good. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So, what am I going to talk about? First, I'm going to just give you a little background to make sure we're all on the same page about what I'm talking about, which is what exactly is a peer-reviewed journal compared to other anything else that's written in science or academia. Like, how do we know exactly that it's a peer-reviewed journal? And actually, that issue of like, how do you know, leads to a few challenges I wanted to highlight because the tips that I'm going to give you in this are directly related to those particular challenges. Now, there's like 100 million challenges, but I just wanted to give you something like that you could take away from this and go, okay, I'm now a little more smarter and empowered about this really complicated kind of difficult situation, which is scientific publishing in the peer-reviewed journal. So I said 3 tips to make your journey from manuscript to publication easier, and it is kind of a journey. Um, as an aside, it depends on whether you're just authoring it alone or you have a group, and usually there's a group. And when there's a group, it's a real journey because you're dragging these people along. So that's part of why I picked these 3 tips to give. Is there tips that help you work with even a group of authors, whether you're like kind of in a student status where you're doing research as a student, and then you're going to try and publish it, and then you have your faculty as authors, or you're just a professor or academic like me, and you just have your peers and you're a group. All right, so that's what I'm going to talk about. Let me go and see if there's any questions or any highs. Nope, not yet. All right. Okay, I said the first thing I was going to do is define what I was talking about with this peer reviewed journal. So, how do you know if a journal is peer reviewed? Well, the snotty answer is it uses the peer review method. Okay. But without being snotty, that's literally how you know is it uses a method of peer review. Now, that's where there's a little devil in the details. But what exactly is peer review? Well, I want you to really imagine how a journal works. I'm really gonna just try to create an image in your mind, like a guided meditation. Only this one's stressful. Okay, I'm gonna give you stress. But anyway, so I want you to imagine this journal as a business that's not there to make a lot of money. Most journals are not there to make money. They're either nonprofits if they're in the US, um, or they're sometimes societies like the American Journal of Public Health is there from the American Public Health Association. So that association has this journal. And the journal, I think they're both nonprofit. They might even be part of the same thing. And so this nonprofit business, okay, so it's not trying to make a profit, it's just trying to run. What does it actually do? Well, what it does, the people who actually are hired to work at the journal, there's not a lot of scientists hired to work there. Not a lot of people like that. There are people hired to work there, but they're more like business people, like managers and office people. And their goal is to actually facilitate, see that diagram on the slide, to facilitate a process like that happening. The Who are the peers in the peer review? They're not the people who work at the journal. They're all of us out there in the world. Like if you're listening to this and you're going, "Oh, I want to submit for the peer reviewed journals. I want to publish in there." You're a peer and I'm a peer. And so we don't work for the journal. So how do we review stuff for the journal? So that's what happens is, let's say me and my customers get together and we write a paper. Okay, well, am I? I'm this consultant, this epidemiologist. And where are my customers? They're professors and other epidemiologists, people at the government all over the world. We all get together and we're like, we have to write this paper, you know? So, and we do, and they're working somewhere else, and who's paying them to write the papers? Sometimes no one. People pay me to write papers for them. So that's my business. But if you work at like I have a friend who works, she's like the director of a nursing program. She has to write papers like sort of as part of her job. And so So it's like part of her salary that she's getting. She's expected to write these papers. So it's like, how do you know, the journal's not paying her. The journal's not paying me. Like if I help her write a paper, like I do statistical analysis for her, she'll pay me for that work, but the journal's going to get it, right? So how is this, you know? So what happens is I get my group together and we prepare a journal article. We decide what journal to send it to. And then usually the journals are set up so that you go online to a journal and you'll see it has like about and then instructions for authors. And if you go to the instructions for authors, they'll say, hey, you want to submit to our journal? Go ahead, set up an account on our journal portal and go log in and fill it out and hit submit and we'll get it. Okay. So I go do that. And then when I hit submit, guess who gets it? Right. Those people at the journal, the actual business managers, office people. Every day they go in and they check that portal. That portal sort of runs how the journal's business is now. Think of it like a course management system, the way you do that if you're going to school or college, the way the course management system sort of manages that business of teaching. Well, these journal portals manage the business of going back and forth and doing peer review, right? So what happens is I hit submit. So when I hit submit, I've already made an account on there. And when I made an account, I told them, I checked off things that said I'm good at biostatistics. I know informatics. I know data science. I'm an epidemiologist. And let's say that we're submitting to an oral health journal, like a dentistry journal. I don't know much about dentistry. I know about epidemiology of oral health. So I'll check those things off. When I do that, I go into their database. And later, if that journal has some oral health epidemiology paper submitted from someone else and they need somebody to review it, a peer, they're probably going to go find me because they have my account information. In fact, they'll literally log into that portal, find my record, and just email me from the portal and say, "Hey, we got the submission. Do you want to review it?" So when I'm the author, I log in and I hit submit. But when I'm the reviewer, I log in on the same account and there's a tab that says author and a tab that says reviewer. And I go over the reviewer tab and I go, "Oh, here's my papers for review." Right? So who am I? I'm just this freelance epidemiologist in Boston. My group could submit a paper, let's say it's on oral epidemiology, and to some dentistry journal. They've got a database. They're going to go and query like people in the database to do the peer review, right? So if you think of all the dental schools all over the world, maybe they're going to get, an email from that portal that says, "Hey, you want to review this," right? So how many people do they send it to? It depends on the journal. How long do they give them to review it? And those peer reviewers have to log in and click, 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 enter their review. And they give you feedback and stuff. And that takes a long time. And then you get it. And some of the journals they'll make it so it's anonymous, like you don't know who's reviewing you. Some of them don't. There's again, just about every point I'm making, there's a whole like debate about out there that we could get into. But in any case, what happens is like it goes out for the review. So however many reviewers complete a review, submit them. It goes back to the author. So like when I got this author team, I collect these 2 or 3 reviews and my my group always starts crying and wailing and I always calm them down. And I say it's no problem. We got a review, just make these changes and we'll submit it again, they'll like it, right? So I have to go through and make a letter where I list all the changes asked and sometimes more than one reviewer asks for the same changes. I try to prevent there from being a weak spot in the papers, but everybody's just different and they see different things. In any case, we just write this letter and we explain how we fixed everything, and we actually do fix everything. I log back in the portal, submit everything, and usually by then everything is fixed. The reviewers look at it again, they're like, "Yeah, that's fine," and and then the journal goes on to publish it, right? So this image on the slide is a diagram of that how that process works at a particular publisher of journals. Wiley, you see that on the slide, is a publisher of many scientific journals. And if you submit to any of those journals and you follow this decision tree, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay. So this is a long way of saying there may be different ways. This is Wiley's way. There may be different ways they find the peer review, different amounts of time, whatever. But in general, if the journal is doing this really hard work of going out there and finding peers to review this and then getting these comments back and getting everybody to do that, if they're doing all that, then they're a peer reviewed journal. So now that I just explained that to you, you're like, oh my gosh, that is so much work. And um so it's like, even how do the journals make money, right? Well, the libraries have to carry the journals, like Harvard Library or University of Minnesota Library. So that's how they make their money. But you see that they're really operating in a very cheap way, and basically just facilitating all this peer review. And then somebody like me, I like to publish a lot. So what's fair is I review a lot. And go ahead and ask anybody. I review all the time. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this live stream is a lot of my customers are asking me to teach them how to do peer reviews. Like they don't know because they don't teach you in school. Isn't that funny? But anyway, so if you are thinking of submitting to a journal and you're like, I'm not sure this is a peer reviewed journal, go on the website, go look for instructions to authors, go look for the about, and see if it says something about peer review. Because if it's going to do this big hard thing, it's peer reviewed journal. Okay, so let me just go and see if there's any questions. Nope, no questions. Or I can't see any questions. So if you have any questions, you got to come in on YouTube and ask questions, or I won't see them. All right. So this brings us to our first common challenge, and that is predatory journals. And these are journals that are not operating in good faith. They're not trying to be a journal. They're trying to scam and make money. And if you as you've already probably noticed, that the journal business doesn't lend itself to scamming and making a lot of money. But they found a business model called the predatory journals. That's like a predator is like, like if a lion goes and attacks a deer, the lion's a predator, right? Well, these journals get created, like the other journals get created, like the American Journal of Public Health, because the society wants, to disseminate scientific knowledge, which is what you're supposed to do, right? Like maybe like there's certain universities, I can't remember any off the top of my head, or colleges that will have their own peer review journal. It's kind of cool. um I'm not familiar with one at the University of Minnesota, but I know that they have them. Like I've seen one in Texas or whatever, and they're small. They're like low budget, but they're operating in good faith. They're trying to get research out, peer reviewed research. What predatory journals do is they don't care about that. They just want to make money. And so in reality, whenever you submit to a peer reviewed journal and you a legitimate one and you need to publish, you might find that they charge a fee of a few $1,000s. And that fee is going to be a little bit more if they publish open access, meaning that you can go and download the PDF on the web afterwards. All of my customers complain about this fee, but I tell them, please don't complain. Please just pay it. Budget for it in grants. Let's just pay it. Because first of all, the journals are not really the legitimate journals are not really making very much money. And also, if you publish something open access and people can download that PDF, they're going to reference it. So, and just people are going to read your stuff if you have it out there. So when you go to a legitimate journal and you're paying those fees, what are you paying for? You're paying for them to make it all nice, make the PDF be on the web, not have any typographical errors, make sure that real peers are peer reviewing. Like I really am an epidemiologist, like they're not sending me something that I can't review. You know what I mean? Like they're really doing, that's what that fee goes to, is to make that so they can really do what they're saying. In a predatory journal, what they'll do is they'll say they're a journal. They'll say, everybody submit to us, we're a journal. They'll send emails. Guess what? We're having an edition on diabetes. Send us your papers, whatever. Then when they get the papers, Their idea is they're going to try and accept them all so they can just charge these people money. But how do they go through that and create a veneer or a patina of peer review? Well, they kind of get other people involved on a volunteer basis. And I'll tell you the story of one of my customers. So I feel like a mom with a bunch of toddlers by a street, and I'm trying to keep these toddlers out of the street. Okay, that's the way I feel about my customers and predatory journals. Okay, because they always want to go over there and submit to a predatory journal. I'm like, get out of the street. No. And they're like, but Monica, they'll review it right away. And I'm like, but it's a scam. It's a lie. And a lot of times they don't really understand. Well, one of my customers got ran over in the street. She joined the editorial board of a predatory journal without realizing it. Then when they started asking her to do stuff, she didn't know how. So she's like, "Monica, what's going on?" And that's when I was like, So I said to her first said to her, "Resign now." So I wrote a resignation letter for her to submit, and she's like, "No, no, no, Monica, I just want the experience. I want to try to be an editor here." And I I didn't I thought it was a dangerous thing, but I worked with her. I mean, it was her choice. And I learned why it's bad to do that. First of all, she couldn't tell what was going on because they didn't really have that many people hired there. Obviously, there's scam. So she'd ask questions about like they wanted her to go find peer reviewers, and she's like, "From where? Do you guys are supposed to have a database?" And there were people just like not answering her questions from the predatory journal. Then she was given these articles to review that were not good at all. Like they didn't even what normally happens in a normal journal is, let's say somebody submits an article in English, but the English is so bad you just cannot even understand it. The editors just briefly look at everything and they'll say, "No, we can't review this. We can't even understand it." Or let's say that I like recently this happened. We have a paper, my colleague and I, on an oral health topic, and we submitted it to a certain journal. And that journal said that they aren't interested in that topic, but they have a sister journal, like another journal published by the same publisher that would be interested in the topic, right? So you might, submit to a journal. Every time you submit to a journal, the editor, one of the editors at least looks at it. And remember, the editors are also academics. They're like peers. They're just people working at colleges. And so these journal staff will, get the stuff off the portal and show it to the editors. And they're like, "No, this isn't right for us." They'll just say, "No, thank you." Well, in a predatory journal, they'll just accept everything, and they'll just be like, "Okay," and you can't even read it. And so here I was trying to help my customer review it. She's like, "Monica, I want to learn how to review stuff." I'm like, you can't review stuff that's just garbage. So I was like telling her to write back to them, "We're not going to peer review these things. There's no way to make it better." Right. And so I started realizing the risk to these people during COVID-19. There was a predatory paper published about vaccines that was wrong and got a lot of press. It had to be redacted. And people said, "Well, how did it get so wrong?" Well, the paper was bad. The people reviewing it were not experts in whatever the paper was in. I mean, it was just a complete breakdown of the journal system. And so what I always do, like my customers are always sending me emails, forwarding me emails from these predatory journals to say, "Submit here, submit there." And I always send them to this web page I have on there called on the slide called Bell's List. And I put a link there. This is a list of it's called the gray literature. Like one of the publishers is called MDPI. I consider MDPI a predatory publisher. Like I don't like them, and I won't reference stuff from them. MDPI is argues that they have a peer review infrastructure, that they're really a peer review journal. So they're going to be mad that I said this, and they're mad that Bell's always brings them up. Okay, but I tend to like there are certain publishers I consider predatory and Bell considers predatory that are trying to push back saying, "No, no, we have this peer review process." But I have a feeling it's a lot like exactly what my customer experience, which is n- not acceptable. So I just feel like it's really important to teach people information literacy in science about these predatory journals. And so that's what I'm doing right now. So this is a real challenge in my field. Okay, let me go look and see if there's any questions here. Nope, no questions. All right, here's the second common challenge. Okay, well, let's say that you get a legitimate publisher like Wiley, and you just decide that you're going to publish. You got a good group, you write a good paper, you're going to go publish. What happens is the process becomes very confusing because you have to just do one thing at a time. Remember how I said you can submit to a journal? Like we submitted to that oral health journal, and they were like, this isn't exactly on the topic we publish on, but we could give it to our sister journal. Okay, well, the sister journal might have different standards and they have different portal. So I have to make a new folder for that. Like the first one, we did everything submitted. Then I get the notices and then I make it like a new folder and I'm like, okay, here's the second one. Um, let's say that instead they did review it and they give us feedback. Then I'm going to have to keep track of the fact that I went into the portal, got the feedback, and then we're making a new letter explaining what we did and we're submitting it. Um, and so, sometimes you have to go to multiple journals. Sometimes they just say we don't want to review it. Bye. Start over. So you end up with having like a lot of folders and a lot of information and a lot of different versions, which are all sort of like the end version. They're just formatted differently to comply with the instructions. So you get things get very confusing as you go along, and you have to be very careful, especially if you're in a group of people, that you don't lose like figures or you don't have an outdated table or anything like that. Then the third challenge is, as you can see by this flow chart, even if you go really fast, it takes a long time. So let's say it's January and you submit a paper, and the stars are lucky for you. They decide to review it at the journal. They send it to 3 peer reviewers, and they take about a month to peer review it. And they submit their review, and you take maybe just a few days to revise it. And then journal sends it back to the reviewers. They say, okay, yeah, oh yeah, it looks good. You did a good job. Now we're into March, and then by April, maybe it's accepted. But when is the journal actually going to put it up on the journal site, right? This is like fast. Like if you can go from manuscript to publication in 6 months, that's fast. So that's not very fast. There are a lot of challenges in trying to shorten that time. That's what I always do is I've tried to come up with tricks. I have like literally 500 of them. I'm giving you 3 in this, but my tips and tricks are all about shortening that time because you can't make the stuff go away. There's got to be peers, there's got to be the journal portal. You just got to do all that. But how do you like suck a little air out of the time, like make the timeline, just pull little inches out of the timeline and make it just a little faster, right? One of them is to just pick the right journal in the first place, which is hard, but I'm good at that. So that's what you pay big bucks for me to do for you. If you pick a journal that's going to like it, they review it right away. And if the journal reviews it and they almost always want you to do some fixes. But if it's really well written and you choose the right journal, the fixes are minor. So as soon as you get it back, you can just fix it and turn it around. So the less back and forth, the faster the process goes. So all my tips are sort of designed towards reducing the amount of back and forth between the reviewers in the journal and you in the journal, your authors in the journal. Let me see if I got any questions here. Nope. All right. So now the 3 tips I came up with for you today are aimed at these challenges. Okay. They if you employ these tips, they can help ensure you are aiming your manuscript at reputable journals, okay, and not um predatory ones. It can help you prevent confusion as you try to get your paper published. Even a good paper can take a few submissions. And the goal is to just shorten the process overall so it doesn't take as long. So here's the first tip: know your publishers. So I was talking to you about predatory publishers, like in the gray and the black publishing like area. These are the quote unquote white publishers, like the ones that we know and they have a good reputation. I put Wiley on the slide. We know Elsevier, we know BMC, we know Springer Nature, Lippincott, Taylor and Francis Online. I'm sure those of you who are watching and are listening to me, you're like, oh, I recognize all that. Oh yeah, I recognize that tree from Elsevier. Well, yeah, we recognize it because we see it all the time, but did you ever really look and study these businesses, these publishers? It's really important to do so. I put a link in the slide. One of these, the Sacramento State uh, is a college, and they put out a library guide, which just has a list with all the links. Just go read about these organizations because they actually have a lot of power, over what we end up seeing in the scientific literature. Um, and there's like I said, everything I bring up, there's a huge debate about it. Like a lot of people are mad at Elsevier and also these other ones because let's say that I publish, I'm one of the authors and I publish something, I got to pay a fee, but after it's published, if it's not open access and I don't subscribe to the journal and I don't work in some place that has it in their library, I have to pay for my own article. I have to buy my own article from Elsevier if that were to happen, if that circumstance occurred. So that circumstance is getting less and less common because there's more and more open access publishing. But philosophically, there's something wrong with that. So people are kind of mad about that because we're the authors and we just seem to have no power in this. But still, it's important then publishers are different. They have different journals and they have different rules. So it's worth it to just study these publishers. Look at like I was talking about oral health. Let's say you're in sociology, or let's say you're in like health disparities, or you're in like, you know, um, endocrine cancer. Like I'm just picking any of these fields. Whatever field you're in, you're gonna know the publishers that you see a lot of stuff from. And, like, I put these on the slide. So if you're watching this and you're like, "Well, I don't actually recognize some of those." Well, you're probably in topics that I'm not in, and you have different for instance, I have one of my customers, she's a business professor, and she publishes in business, and she's really intelligent. So, whenever it's time to publish, she tells me what journal we're gonna go to and stuff because the business publisher journals they're not these, okay? And so but she knows what she's doing, she's an academic, and so she studies those. And so I'm saying study these, at least start by studying where your literature is in your, field. And what you can do is go to the journals in each of the publishers, like go to Elsevier journals, go to BMC journals, and you'll notice the journals on different topics, but they sort of have the same style, because they're all published by the same um, publishing house. So they tend to have similar instructions for their instructions to authors, and one of the things I coach people on is if you already are a writer, you're a student maybe, and you're writing papers. Look at where are the journals coming. What journals are the references you're taking coming from? Like if you're referencing scientific articles, what journals are they published in, and what publishers are they attached to? So this is a big picture way of saying get to know your field from the point of view of what journals are hot, not just what journals, but what publishers they're connected to. And if there's just a few publishers that are big in your field, really get to know those publishers. And so just being empowered with knowledge like of what I've just described can make it so that you make choices when you're doing your peer reviewed publication that shorten the time. Like you maybe might pick a particular publisher or journal because you groove with them somehow. Like you guys get along really well for some reason. I kind of it sounds silly, but this colleague I'm talking about, who's a business colleague, she has certain journals that we groove with. Like they love our stuff, and we just do well with them, so we just keep going back. Sometimes you can get into a relationship like that. Because each journal has its own audience, And so again, you just have to empower yourself with the knowledge. Okay? So that's tip number 1. I'm going to check for questions. No questions. Okay. So here's tip number 2. And it's totally like tip number 1 is pretty big picture philosophical. Tip number 2 is really practical. And that is keep a notes page on all of your submissions. So you'll see these screenshots on the slide. The green one with the green outline says notes about Journal of Public Health Dentistry. Next one says notes about American Journal of Preventive Medicine. Next one says notes about health affairs. You'll see that health affairs one. There's a bunch of links to the website. There's a bunch of notes about how long the research article can be. So these are just Word documents. I just make a Word document for each journal we submit to, and I write any notes I need and you get good at it. You kind of know what you need to remember. So I I'll tell you, I've been teaching this to all my customers. No one will do it. Absolutely, people resist this like crazy. I don't know why they won't do it. And how I know is I'll teach it, and then I'll get a customer coming back to me after a year. I maybe haven't talked to them. They'll say, "Help me out. I submitted a journal. They want a journal article. They want revisions, and I'm having trouble making the revisions." And I'm like, "Okay, no problem. I can help you." But then when I go for the original submission, try to figure out what happened, they don't remember. I'm like, "Where's the link to this? What's your account name and password? When did you submit it? How long who are the co-authors? How do we get a hold of them? Did you get they all this is lost. They don't remember." I'm like, "Why did you pick this topic? Why did you do?" And so I end up having to make the notes page. Like you can't get out of it. I can't get out of it. I end up trying to make the notes page after the fact. And I'm like, "Why didn't you just do what I said?" I don't know why they don't do what I say. But I'm trying to tell you to do what I say. I don't know. Maybe you have to not do it and regret it before you start doing it. And that's probably how I got started. But in any way, how you do it is each time you submit a draft, either it's the first time you're submitting it to that journal, or you're revising it because the journal said, "Oh, we like it, but do these changes." The peer reviews did. If it's the first time you're submitting to the journal, like make a notes page and explain everything about how to log into that portal, how you formatted things because they all want different formatting. And then on that notes page, keep track of each time there's back and forth between the journal and you. Like sometimes um, the peer reviewers will review and give you a bunch of feedback. You'll do a bunch of changes. You'll give it back to them, and their changes will spark that they want other things changed. I don't mind that if that happens and we're getting towards an outcome, because when I review, I've been in a lot of situations where the people submit a pretty good paper, but they do the statistics wrong. They just do them wrong. Like they collected the data, but they did the statistics wrong, and so I don't know the answer to the research question. And I'm very teacherly. I just explain to them how to do the statistics right. And in my feedback, and I'm like, please do that. And the next time we'll know what happened. We'll know about your research aim. Because if you don't do it right, you don't know the answer. So then they'll give it back to me and they'll do it right because I give good instructions. And they're usually really happy because now it's obvious what the answer to the research question is. If you don't do the data right, like you're just like, I don't know, you know, and then they've become happy about that. And their discussion is so much better. Everything is better about it. But sometimes there's just like there's new information. They answered the research question. So maybe there's some debate in there and then I have to send it back once more. So to prevent that, just do a really good job writing the first draft. Like just make sure that your statistics matches your research aim, you answered, just do a really good job the first draft and then it won't have to come back and forth twice, right? Well, that's easier said than done, but that's why you hire me because I'm really good at that first draft. But when you submit that first draft um, to that journal, you keep a notes page with all this information, and each time they come back and ask you to revise it, you put notes on that page. But remember, each time you revise a draft according to what the peers said, you not only give submit a new draft on that journal portal, but you also submit a letter that's a separate letter that listed all the changes. Like, for example, you know how I was saying, I'll tell them you need to change your statistics. Don't do them like you're doing. Do them like this. And I often like link them to an actual article that does them that way. And I say, okay, and use this variable for this, use that variable for that, and make a table like their table 3 or whatever. And I'll have all these instructions, right? And then in their letter back, they'll sort of copy those instructions and say, okay, we tried to do everything she said, but we ran out of data on this one or whatever, and they'll just sort of explain how they tried to do it. It's kind of like you're the teacher and you say, try to do this. And the student says, okay, well, we did our best and this is how it came out. So because you have to do that letter each time, you yourself as the author, when you're the author, you remember what you changes you made and why, because you have to write that letter, and so that letter exists. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. You just have to go back to this notes page and update and keep track of the fact that you had another round. So you always have those letters. That never goes away. It's this notes page that sort of ties together all the transactions on this and curates all that. That's super helpful. And it's not only is it super helpful if you have it, it's horrible if you don't. Like, I will make one to solve your problem, because I won't be able to solve your problem. This is like step 0 of solving a problem if you have one. All right, let me go see if anybody has any questions yet. Oh, hi, CJ is here. So everybody, CJ is a local Boston-based musician, and he's probably got to go right away because he plays gigs pretty much every day. He's usually at the Heinz Convention Center subway stop. If you're in Boston, go catch him. He's usually 1:30 to 3:30. He's got music. That's what I use in my videos. So thank you, CJ. He's also got paintings that he does. They're gorgeous, and you can find him. He's CJ Hutch on Instagram and on Spotify. No, I think he's CJ Hutchings on Instagram. Well, he's on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can find him. But anyway, thanks for showing up, CJ. I really appreciate it. I go to his concerts a lot. So I said you got to show up for my live stream. So that's awesome. And thanks again for the music. The unfortunate thing about CJ is my videos with his music on them. Everybody says the video, they don't like the video, they just like the music. Totally annoying. Anyway, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go back to my slide presentation. I see there's no real questions. So I'm going to give you the final tip, which is tip number 3. And that is, have a pretend reviewer. What do I mean by that? Well, remember how I said you create a journal portal, article portal, or you create an account on the journal article portal, and you get everything ready. One of you has to be the corresponding author, and it's usually me because I'm good at correspondence. But anyway, so like if I also teach people how to be the corresponding author. Like, sometimes my customers are like, Monika, I'm tired of you controlling everything. Can I be the corresponding author? I'm like, sure. So when you're the corresponding author, you're the person in charge of getting this portal ready and submitting it. What a good thing to do. Remember how I said if you write a really good draft the first time, it reduces the back and forth and reduces the time to publication. Well, how do you write a really good draft the first time? Well, here's a trick. Like, if you're not me and you aren't just good at it, and you're starting out and you're like, I can't afford Monika. Here's what you do. Find a colleague who you think is a good writer, who's your friend, who's just supportive, or a professor, like somebody who's supportive of you. And after your team puts together your manuscript, ask that person if they will act like they were doing a peer review. Like they get it, like a real peer reviewer, as if they got it on the portal. And it was anonymous and they didn't know it was you guys, right? And then they would write an actual review, because when you write a review, like I'll like I was giving you an example of the kind of review I often write, where I'll be like, oh, this background is really good. That research question is great. I totally agree with it. The methods, yeah, they're clear. I can kind of see your data collection. I can see where you're going, but you did the statistics wrong, so I don't really understand the results, right? Like, that's the kind of things that I'll be saying in there. And so imagine you had me pre-review it, did the pretend reviewer and gave it to you, and I had all these changes and stuff, if I have them, probably other people would notice it. That's one of the things I've noticed is there's if you think there's something wrong with your paper, everybody probably thinks there's something wrong with your paper. Like if anybody thinks there's something wrong, it probably is wrong. Or it's probably something you should get ahead of. Right? Like if they're saying, "Oh, should you really use this statistic?" Then I'm like, "Well, we probably should write a whole paragraph about why we picked that statistic, right? Just to head them off any questions." But anyway, so if you get a pretend reviewer, somebody to write you an actual review, and then you actually go through and do all the feedback. What's different is you don't have to write a letter back to them and say what you did. It's just private. It's like they write a review, give it to you, and say you can do with it what you want. You good luck. And by the way, I do this with grants too. I would recommend if you get your grant done before the deadline to have somebody be pretend grant reviewer and actually write it, give it to you, and then have you fix the grant, you know. So that's this step is the goal is a step to catch obvious issues and prevent some back and forth. And I'll tell you, it can be hard to find the right person who owes you and is also a good reviewer, but it's way better if you're unsure, if you're at the beginning of your career and your writing career and you're unsure, this is a really good idea. And you can form like pairs, and it's okay if the person's not exactly in your field. In fact, it's sometimes better because it's easier for them to catch if something's confusing, like you didn't even explain where these, how you sampled these participants or something like that. All right, let me see if there's any questions here. Okay, we got a question here. Thanks for showing up, Bruce Lee. Um, Bruce Lee says, how do you apply to be a peer reviewer, right? And so, in other words, what Bruce Lee is hoping to be is she's wanting someday to receive that email from a journal that says, "Would you like to review this article?" Well, the way that that normally happens is the way that they would know about her is that if she had already submitted a different paper on that journal portal, right? Because when she signed up for her account to be a corresponding author, they'd say, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Here's a list of topics. Check off the ones you're good at," right? And like I was saying earlier in this, when I get that, I check off public health and statistics and data science and stuff, right? But if you're an infectious disease person, you're checking off different things, right? And so what I would recommend specifically for you, Bruce Lee, is remember my first tip, which is get to know different publishers. I would take that a step farther and get to know different journals. And if you see a journal and you're like, I know about that, I could actually review a paper from that. Just create an account as if you were going to submit a paper and then don't submit one because then you'll be in their database with your classifications and they might find you. And this is not a bad idea for actually people who are students, like in your PhD. If you want to practice reviewing, you want to see if you can get reviews, sent to you, just sign up on these journal portals and don't submit a paper. And you should be able, they should start finding you. Now, if you work at a journal and you're like, okay, I got to find somebody to review this paper, and all you find in your database is some grad student who's never published anything, um, it might not be the first person you pick to review that. However, if you're talking about like factor 7 and that, which is a blood factor, and that's what the topic is about, and the paper's about, and this grad student's an expert at factor 7, maybe that they'll be chosen. So that's where I would start. But actually, as soon as you start being an author, as soon as you start publishing, you'll end up automatically being swooped up into that ecosystem and you'll start getting emails as a peer reviewer. As a side note, since we're on this topic, I tell all my customers that even though a lot of my customers are tenured professors at like, really reputable colleges, but I'll say use your Gmail account on when you sign up for these places, for your email account. Like use Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail or whatever. because it's it's usually easier to make sure you can always log into your Gmail account. Like if you work at like one of my customers, she has a dual appointment at two different colleges, and one of them got confused and cut off her email. They didn't realize she was still appointed there, and it was so much trouble to get it reinstated. Well, if she had used that email for one of the journal communication things, we would have missed all those emails there. So it's good to use your Gmail for all of these, even if you work some cool place. All right. So now I'm going to just go to our start wrapping up the live stream. So just for review, today's tips, and as you can see, I have 500 tips, but I thought I'd give you 3 tips that you could probably implement right now. Is one is get to know your publishers. Go to that link and get to know who's what publishers and what journals are being used in the field where you want to publish. If you actually do submit something for publication to one of these journals, keep a notes page for each journal on all your submissions. Really try and do it. And if you don't do it and it starts to bite you in the butt, right? Remember, this is why I told you to do it. See if you can have the discipline, right? And then 3, if you can have a colleague act as a pretend reviewer before you submit a paper, especially if you're sort of early in your writing career, it's really can be very helpful to shortening the time for peer review. Even if like if I receive a manuscript and I read it real quick and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is really good. This is really good. This is really clear." I'll review it right away. But if I'm confused and I have to look up a lot of stuff, like I don't think they did it right, it takes me longer. So again, that can even shorten the review. So one of the things I realized I just said a bunch of is it's really hard to find that colleague to do the review. And if you find one, they might not be that good at it because they might be new in their career. So I decided to make you a special offer. If you're on the live stream or you're watching this later, if you've got a manuscript you're getting ready to submit, and you're like, Monica, I'm going to submit this American Journal of Hypertension or whatever, and you want me to do pretend reviewer, I'll do it for 50 bucks. It's like a cheap price because normally I charge a lot. Um, and so all you have to do is send me an email, and reference this live stream. Send me an email or LinkedIn with the current Word document about and information about where you're submitting it. And then I'll send you a PayPal to pay the fee, and then I'll write you a really nice response. And if I've got questions, where we can always meet, but I'll write you a really nice response so that if you're especially new in publishing, you can see an example of a peer review thing that's like customized. Like my customers always say, "Oh my gosh, that was really helpful." Like, because I'll do that with their dissertations and stuff. I'll write something like that, and they'll be like, "Wow, that was helpful to just see that." You know. Um, all right. So, so we're getting towards the end of the live stream. I think this is all the slides I had. Yep. And the slides, I'm going to stop sharing. These slides will be available. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, like uh, this video and change the description on the YouTube version of this and put timestamps in, and then I'll put the link to the slides so you can download them. But so I'm it's interesting because again, I've got this Restream software and I've got this little thing that says how many people are joining, and it has just said 0 the whole time, but obviously we saw CJ and we saw Bruce. So I don't know how many people actually watch this. And I apologize again to anybody on LinkedIn or YouTube. If you tried to chat and I didn't see it, it's not in that overlay where you can see Bruce and CJ's chat, then it's there's just something wrong with the software. It should work if you're chatting from YouTube. So I'm going to just try to disseminate that information each time I hold a live stream. But in any case, thank you for showing up if you did, and thank you for watching this. If you're watching it and it's recorded, it's helpful if you really liked it. If you actually think these are good tips, please hit the like button because that way people will know that this is a worthwhile video to watch. Because I'm going to put this timestamps in there, and people don't have a lot of time to be honest, and that's why I do that. I try to make it easy to consume this information because people are just too busy. Um, and then also, like, if you like this live stream or if you like this recording, you'll consider subscribing to me, and then it'll show up in your feed when I'm doing a live stream. I think you have to hit a special notification. But what you can do, I think, when you subscribe to people is you can subscribe to all their notifications. And if you do that, you'll not only find out that I'm doing this, but you'll find out whenever I publish a new video because I'm trying to get more programming videos up. And I'm also trying to get more videos up about just bigger picture stuff like application of our skills in our field because that apparently is sort of harder. You can go on data camp, you can go on LinkedIn learning, you can learn Python, you can do Kaggle, you can do these things. But what about when you go to work and it's not Kaggle, it's the data from work and you have to solve problems at work as a data scientist? Yeah, it's hard. So I'm trying to do more videos where I'm showing use cases. I'm showing how I actually solve problems, because that's the hard part of trying to be a data scientist after you learn everything. Um, all right, so it's Saturday and it's beautiful out, so hopefully you will have a good weekend. And maybe I'll see you in the chat next week.